Dram Show with me, Chris Goodrum. Okay, so as you can see from the title page, or the title picture as the case may be, it's time for a Jura tasting. Now, yes, I can hear the sharp intake of breath from here from a number of you, and it is true I've probably not been overly complimentary about Jura and a number of other distilleries over the years, but there's been a bloody good reason for it. Anyway, so why am I doing Jura? Well, the owners of Jura, White & Mackay, are not one of the whisky companies that I have a relationship with, insofar that I don't buy directly from them. So generally speaking, I only get to see a rep from White & Mackay once in a blue moon, or generally speaking whenever the rep changes and a new rep suddenly appears out of nowhere. And lo and behold, that happened fairly recently because Jura had decided to change its range. And he brought with me a lovely little piece of marketing stuff to say why they had changed their range. Apparently their range was too confusing for the consumer. Okay, so the range consisted of an unpeated 10-year-old and an unpeated 16, I think, and then two peated expressions, well, sort of peated, the Superstition and the Prophecy. Seemed pretty simple to me, pretty straightforward, but no, apparently not. So, according to the marketing guff, we are changing every aspect of Jura to deliver our global ambition. God, don't you just love that kind of statement? So, number one, accessible and consistent product experience. Now stop laughing, stop sniggering, you know, I'm sure their PR department really means this. Number two, distinctive premium new packaging. Okay, well, fine. And number three, memorable contemporary communications. God, bloody hell, that has got marketing written all over it, hasn't it? And which just says it's using nice pictures by some leading photographer that I've never heard of, but then I don't tend to follow photographers. So anyway, so there you have it. So that is the reason that I'm doing Jura, because they kindly gave me a load of samples, and it would be rude not to review them, it has to be said. And so, okay, so why have I been less than complimentary about Jura in the past? Well, historically, when I first started in the industry, a long time ago now, Jura was a pleasant 10-year-old, might have actually been an 8-year-old at the time, but I forget, my notes really only sort of, some of my early 2000 notes are, you know, well, been lost, should we say. So my notes on Jura kind of really started 2008, which is, you know, quite late in relative terms. But anyway, so I always remembered the sort of Jura to be quite nice, quite coastally, quite, I remember it being sort of slightly honeyed, barleyed, pleasant, a little bit simple but straightforward, maybe a little bit overly chlorinated, certainly from looking at some of my earlier tasting notes on their whisky. But it wasn't bad, it wasn't a bad whisky at all, you know, they were certainly worse. But over the years things seemed to change, and a lot of people, and it's a question I do get asked an awful lot, is why did the character of distilleries' whiskies change over the years? Some for the better and some for the worse. And in a lot of respects, I think it just boils down simply to demand. Demand for single malt whiskies is continually rising, and there's going to be a squeeze on stocks. And I remember sort of doing some research into this some time ago when I wrote an article on it, and I forget which distillery it was, but a number of the smaller distilleries, you know, that are very popular, are literally selling more whisky than they can physically produce, and in some cases more than they can have actually got storage capacity for. And it doesn't take a genius to figure out what the hell's going to happen if that carries on. So what do? Your demand is increasing, so you have to produce more, and that simply boils down to one of two options really. either you put more stills in, more washbacks, etc., etc., to increase your level of production, which is fine if you've got copious millions sat in the bank, or can borrow copious millions. But more importantly, if you've actually physically got space to put new stills in and build a new still room and all this kind of stuff, and you know, a lot of distilleries just do not have that ability to do that. So how then do you increase production? Well, fairly simply, in actual fact. Starting off with the fermentation process, you can trim a few hours off. I mean, most distilleries like to use a combination of different yeasts, fast acting and slow acting yeasts. So yeah, okay, so you tinker with your yeast, more fast acting yeasts, slower fermentation process. Okay, your initial sort of wash will probably be slightly less fruitier, maybe. You'll have less of the long chain esters, but that's not going to be a huge issue at the end of the day, as far as I can see. Secondly, distillation. Okay, so essentially you can basically trim some time off your distillation. You run your stills a bit harder. You don't trickle distill. Ooh, it's a whining putty cat. Come on. Yes, I know. Oh, say hello to the viewers, Barbie. Hello. Anyway, so what was I saying? Right, so okay, so you're distilling a little bit quicker. Now this is where the issues start to crop up, in essence. Basically, less copper contact for your spirit means less removal of sulphurous components, for example. Your next step is probably making a slightly wider cut so you can collect more spirit. And then this, you're obviously in danger of bringing in a little bit more of the faints and the foreshorts into your final spirit, which conversely would require greater maturation time for the wood to basically remove those unwanted elements. But of course, you've got pressure on your stocks, you know, and so therefore you don't have the luxury, shall we say, of extended maturation. You need to get your product out there. So you can cut to no age statement range, like a number of distilleries have done, or to be fair with Jura, at least they've kind of stuck with age statement stuff. But at the bottom end of your range, essentially, you're going to be using, you know, stuff that's just not ready at all. And I've been tasting recently quite a lot of sub 10-year-old whiskies, mainly in the independent sector, that are displaying an unusually huge amount of sulphurous character. And you just only have to make an assumption that these particular distilleries are maybe pushing their stills a little bit harder, and you're just going to have to wait a little bit longer to take those compounds out. It's just as simple as that. So in actual fact, by tinkering with your distillation process, you're actually creating a rod for your own back, and you know, you'd be better off just sticking to the slower distillation period and then sort of maybe bottling your spirit a little earlier rather than trying to force it through, and hence your character kind of takes a complete nosedive. But anyway, I mean, this could all be academic. This new Jura range could be absolutely stunning. So let's have a look at that. Right, okay, so they've decided to call this new range the Signature series, and the whole idea is to basically get back to the what do they say? The house style, which features a subtle smoke at the heart and is complemented by the sweetness from maturation in American white oak and ex-bourbon barrels. So there you go. That's what they're doing. So their first new bottling is a no age statement bottling. It's called Journey. It's bottled at 40%. It's aged in American oak, and it's an entry level, and I think destined for supermarkets and stuff like that. Second bottling in the new range is called just the 10-year-old, which is quite nice. So like I said, it's nice to see the fact they haven't gone down the entire route of complete no age statement bottling. So this 10-year-old is aged in a combination of American white oak and sherry casks. or I think it's actually sherry finished rather than being a blend of the two. So as you can see, slightly darker, so the sherry character looks fairly obvious. The 12-year-old is called the 12-year-old. No fancy names here, and I mean, one of the things I did like about Jura is the sort of the whole kind of mythology kind of thing they were playing around with. I loved the superstition branding. I loved the ankh. I mean, you know, I'm quite into my Egyptian mythology, although quite where Egypt kind of fits with sort of Scotland, I wasn't entirely sure, but it's a whole mythological angle kind of thing, which I kind of quite like. But anyway, so again, this is ex-bourbon casks, so again American white oak, but ex-bourbon casks. It didn't say whether the casks used for the 10-year-old were ex-bourbon or not, but I would suspect they are. And again, finished in ex-Oloroso casks. I like how they're being a little bit more specific about their casks on the 12-year-old. And then we have this, right, okay, so this is a 7-wood. So basically, so far, pretty straightforward. Okay, so we're having we've gone back to basics with regards to our range. We're essentially showcasing the same whiskey at different age statements. And then suddenly we have this, the 7-wood. Quite how that is simplifying things, I honestly couldn't tell you. And it's the marketing guff says ingeniously crafted, no less, from 7 oak cask types for multi-layered flavouring. Or flavour, not flavouring. Oops. So the reality is, it's actually only 2 different wood types. It's basically American oak, or first fill bourbon, I believe, and European oak. Although the European oak is obviously different strains of oak, so they've basically used Vosges, Jouplelles, Les Bertranges, Allier, Troncays and ex-Limousin casks. So how in God's name you're going to actually discover any spirit character buried under all that wood is well and truly beyond me, but there you go. This is supposedly the flagship brand new, all singing, all dancing Jura. And then finally, something with a bit of age, an 18-year-old. But again, it's not just American oak and a bit of sherry, possibly. This is ex-American oak finished in ex-red wine casks. And as they say, a timeless 18-year-old, finished in red wine casks, guaranteed to complete any collection. Well, we shall indeed see if that is indeed the case. But again, how this simplifies the range, I have no idea. Where's your Petered expression gone? You know, I mean, anyway, obviously the proof of the pudding is in the eating, as they say. So I really shouldn't probably say anything else other than let's kick off with the journey. Right, okay, so this is the Journey, aged in American oak and bottled at 40%. Let's see what those give us. Okay, I'll be nice. It's got some pleasant barley notes. There's a little bit of honey, but it's a bit flat. It's a bit, I'm getting quite a bit of the, what I find, classic industrial kind of hard notes. I'll give it its dues. It's not overly fainty, it's not cardboardy, but it is hard. It's industrial. There's a bit of caramel, I think. That is what's flattening this kind of nose down. It's certainly not an exuberant aromatic nose. It's certainly not like Jura used to be, should we say. And you can smell the youth of it. I mean, again, not spirity, but you do get a little bit of sort of mashed tunny kind of cereal notes, which in essence isn't bad. I mean, it's not a criticism. The criticism is more the fact that the spirit is a bit rough, and it's been caramelised. That's the issue that I have with this particular nose. So anyway, let's see what the palate's like. Flat, a bit nondescript, again, too much caramel. It's got a little bit of a lighter moment. There's, on the mid palate you get a little bit of citrus, there's some slight honey, there's some barley. I'm probably doing it a bit of a favour on that point, but it really is quite depressingly flat and ordinary, and really, I mean, yes, all right, it's young spirit, it's never going to be overly complicated, but why the caramel? Why did you feel the necessity to do that? And it is noticeable. It is just so obvious because it has no life. And frankly, it's not bad and dirty. You know, it's a bit industrial, but you know, some people kind of like it a little bit rough at the edges, don't they? So, so unfortunately, the journey is not starting particularly well. Right, okay, so let's move on to the 10-year-old. Let's see what nose gives us on this end, shall we? Okay, plus points. I don't get any caramel. It's rounder, it's maltier. It's got more depth to it, and there's still a little bit of an industrial note in the background. It's not sort of like totally sort of clean. No, that's probably being a little bit unkind, but it's still got an edge to it, shall we say. The sherry is a bit homogeneous, even a bit of sort of spice. There's a bit of dried fruit. There's a little smokiness, I'll give you that. I mean, it's not the worst nose I've ever come across, and it is considerably better than the Journey. But even so, it's still very underwhelming, and it's just that industrial note that just kind of it's not a sort of a lovely estery, fruity kind of whiskey. You know, it's sort of a little bit hard work, I suppose. Anyway, so let's have a look at the palate. Again, on the plus side, it's maltier, it's fuller, it's rounder, but it really is a bit dull. Again, the sherry seems to be more noticeable, but again, it's very homogeneous, it's very polished. It's just maybe a little bit of spice, a bit of dried fruit. It's just, you know, I'm not getting any chocolate, I'm not getting any cocoa, I'm not getting any tannins, I'm not getting any herbal notes. It's just very kind of homogeneous, and it's okay. Again, faintly industrial, just right on the edges, a little bit sort of rough, shall we say. And the biggest criticism I think that I have with it is that it really could have been done with being bottled at 43% or 46 possibly. That extra level of alcohol may well have kind of just brought out the spices a little bit more. I mean, maybe that's what they didn't want. Maybe they wanted more of this kind of laid back sort of Jura kind of character. They didn't want sort of the emphasis to be on the spices, but still, it's just a little bit bland and a little bit underwhelming, it has to be said. Right, okay, so let's move on to the 12-year-old. Essentially the same cask combination as the 10-year-old, and again bottled at 40%. Let's see what those give us. I think somebody's put Auchentoshan in my glass. is this really Jura? I mean, all I can smell is strawberry mousse, rose petals, black pepper. It's Auchentoshan. I mean, this, you know, I mean, where's the continuity? I mean, suddenly we've gone from, yeah, okay, I can see the continuity between the Journey and the 10-year-old. Yeah, I can see that. But then, this is just, talk about bloody left field. I mean, yeah, all right, there's a bit more spicy sherry, a little bit more graininess, touch of coffee possibly, some cinnamon. I mean, actually, it's quite a pleasant nose. It's actually quite nice, but it doesn't say Jura to me one little bit. Like I said, it just, if I was tasting this blind, I would swear that this was Auchentoshan. It really is that left field as far as I can see for Jura. I mean, good God. But like I said, it's not unpleasant. Yeah, if you take it in isolation, this is actually quite a pleasant nose. But that's probably because it doesn't feel like Jura. Oh God, I'm so witty. Anyway, let's see what the palate's like, shall we? Getting a bit of bittering in the finish. I mean, yes, that could possibly be the oak, might be the caramel possibly, I don't know. Again, it's a bit like the 10-year-old. It's a little underpowered in my opinion. It's a little bit watery. Again, I'm getting strawberry mousse, I'm getting rose petals. It's a little fuller, it's a little bit more maltier. There's a little bit of again, slightly homogeneous, but slightly more coffeed, slightly more grittier Oloroso kind of coming through on the mid palate. Less industrial, but maybe that's more to do with the more emphasis on the sherry and this Auchentoshan-y like character. I mean, this is just sort of just odd. I mean, you know, pleasant. I would give it that. It's not too bad at all. I don't know what the 12-year-old is going to retail for, but a lot of 12-year-olds are now kind of pushing the 50 odd, maybe £55 limit, and well, whether I'd feel amazingly comfortable with punting that out at that kind of level, I don't honestly know. I mean, it is not a bad whiskey, but it really just doesn't say Jura to me whatsoever. Right, okay, so let's move on to the Seven Woods. Let's see if I can find any spirit in this end, shall we? Not a great deal, it has to be said. What was the marketing guff on this one? Multi-layered. Right, there's a lot of oak. I mean, it's not a surprise, really, is it? It's got that kind of nice, slightly sappy, spicy, gritty European oak, French oak kind of character. There's a bit of honey, there's a bit of spice. It's got a little bit more going for it because it's bottled at 42%. It's just given the nose that little bit of a lift, and it has actually, well, I mean, whether it's actually amplified the spice is a different matter because there's just a lot of it. There's a little bit of coffee, a little bit of toffee. But again, I'm not really getting very much past all the oak, and so again, to me, I can't see where there's a sort of like a harmony of character. You've gone from sort of like two bottlings that are very similar to each other, or should we say display the same sort of DNA, to a completely left field bottling, to yet another left field bottling. I mean, it's interesting if you like lots of oak at the end of the day, and you're not particularly keen on the character of the spirit, because there isn't really any there at all. There's maybe a little bit of honey and barley, but really it's all about that oak, and whether you call it multi-layered or not, of course, is a open to perception, I suppose. Anyway, let's see what the palate's like. It's got a pleasant finish, it's nice and harmonious on the finish, but again it's very underpowered, it's very, very, I mean, maybe that's what they were kind of getting at or looking for, but it's just, again, it's slightly homogeneous. There's maybe too much oak here. Yes, it's got that slightly spicy, grainy, gritty French oak character. It has some malt and some barley, and it is very rounded and soft. But it's just, and again, I'm just getting very little spirit character, and it's all very, I mean, I'm guessing that the spirit in this is not very old at all, and you could be nasty and say that all that oak is kind of covering up, shall we say, less than great spirit, but I don't get the impression the spirit is, but then I can't taste the spirit, so, you know, it defeats the object of the exercise for me. It's just too unbalanced, and yeah, okay. Okay, and finally we're on to the 18-year-old. So this is now bottled at 44%. Bit of a strange ABV, it has to be said, but yeah, they've chosen that one. And it's ex-bourbon and red wine finished. So let's see what the nose gives us. Some lovely maturity going on here. I'm getting a bit of the mature, dusty American oak briefly. And I'm getting lots of winey red fruits, pepper, cinnamon, a little bit of smoke, maybe more wood smoke than peat smoke, but there is a little bit of smokiness going on, touch of dark chocolate. But again, this is all about the red wine, you know. I mean, briefly, for a split second, I got some lovely mature American oak, and then it just all gone. Again, it's not a bad whiskey at all. I mean, I can't really get a lot of distillery character, and all I can really get is kind of red wine casks. So let's see what the palate gives us. That's a nice spicy finish. Finally, a bit of intensity, it has to be said. Bit of dark chocolate, bit of... No, again, it's pretty much all red wine cask. I mean, yes, there's some almost slightly jammy red fruits. There's a little bit of pepper, a little bit of cinnamon. But I'm not getting an awful lot else. I mean, it's got some maltiness to it. Coffee. It's like cocoa-y bean finish, a nice chewy finish and a nice kind of spiciness on the finish and a little bit of smoke. So again, kind of like taken out of context, it's not too bad. It's a bit unbalanced in my own personal opinion. I think there's too much red wine and not enough of anything else. I don't get any American oak, I don't get any spirit character. And I'm guessing what's your average 18-year-old gonna set you back? Somewhere around about up to about 90 odd pounds. Again, I'm just sort of not comfortable with that. You know, I mean, if I'm sort of looking at, you know, other whiskies in that kind of price point, this is not one that I would suddenly go, yes, you've got to have this, you've got to have this particular whiskey, and that is really what it boils down to at the end of the day. Can I honestly get behind it and sell it? And the answer, I'm afraid, is no. Right, okay, so let's sum today's episode of the show up. Well, I hope you don't think I've been unduly hard on this particular range, but you know, I'm just going to be honest. You know, I think marketing over everything else. I mean, you know, I think that they've just kind of fallen foul of this whole, right, we're going to have this kind of concept, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, right now you've got to put it all together, you know, and it's a case of, I don't know whether it's Richard Patterson that's behind all of this. I mean, I don't know if he's retired. He might have retired. I mean, I know he did an awful lot with Dalmore, you know, maybe somebody can tell me who put this little range together, but it's not the most inspiring of ranges, it has to be said. The journey is just bland, too much caramel, and really sort of bit weak, watery, and you know, the 10-year-old. The 10-year-old is okay, but okay in this day and age does not cut the mustard as far as I'm concerned. There are so many more better, oh, no, better is probably the wrong word, because there are so many more 10-year-olds I would rather sell than this particular one. It's not a bad whiskey, like I said. It's probably, in my personal opinion, the best of the, or the most interesting of the range, even though it does have its flaws, shall we say. But again, you know, that's obviously for you guys to judge. You know, buy a bottle and or maybe a miniature and see what you think. The 12-year-old, well, like I said, I mean, that just kind of like just stuck out like a sore thumb. Not because it was an awful whiskey, but because it didn't taste like Jura whatsoever. It was just like Auchentoshan, for God's sake. Where's the continuity in all of this? You know, it's like kind of, you know, you're changing things because you want more of a noticeable style across your entire range, but the reality is that there isn't. There's no harmony in this range whatsoever. Two similar, yes, and then you've got this thing, and then you've got a 7-wood, which just is like, where does that fit in? You know, and it's just sort of like an oak overkill. You know, it's just like so unbalanced, in my personal opinion. But again, it's not a bad malt. You have to, if you love lots and lots of oak character, you're going to really like it. But for me personally, the balance was just not there. I'm just not getting enough spirit character, or any spirit character really, in actual fact. It's just an exercise in oak, and all that oak in reality hasn't actually created a multi-dimensional, multi-layered whiskey. It's produced quite an homogeneous French oak whiskey. And so I think sort of too much of something can be as bad as not enough of it, if you get what I mean. And the 18-year-old, again, where does that fit in the whole kind of range? It's a wine finish. You know, it's just like, you may as well have done a bloody peated malt, you know, for any want of kind of similarity, shall we say. And it just goes to show that obviously the marketing bods decided that they were going to have this range, that Jura was suddenly going to become this, and whoever blended all this stuff and put it together thought, well, bugger you, you know, this is what I want to do. And if that was indeed the case, then well, hats off. But personally, you end up with completely and utterly mixed messages from the whole thing, and ultimately it just doesn't work. You know, if you really, really wanted to do a sort of a range that encapsulated the character of the distillery, look at what other distilleries are doing. Look at what Arran's doing, for example. Look at what Knockdo is doing, or Tomatin. You know, look at these these distilleries are doing. You know, you essentially have the same whiskey, different age statements, a little bit more sherry in them possibly, but the theme, that the sort of consistency of style and house style really comes through. And yes, all right, if they do a peated one or a bit of a weird and wacky one, they give it a different labelling. They say, right, yes, it's definitely outside of our core range. It's a limited edition. It's what have you, you know, and there is a bloody good reason why Tomatin is often thought of as the leader in innovation in bottling. Just look at their range. All right, you know, you might say, well, I'm not doing my thing, I'm just slavishly following what another distillery is doing, but, you know, when it works, it works. Yeah, all right, put your quirk or your kink on it, as the case may be, but really don't try and sell me this as some kind of balanced range when it obviously isn't, you know. But anyway, there you go. So let's put it this way, I'm not, the distillery ain't going to retweet this episode of the show, and White Mackay are probably never going to visit me ever again. I'll probably be put on their blacklist, I imagine, as people to be put up against the wall and come the revolution shot, I would imagine. But I'm just being honest. I'm just being honest, and if you can take honest appraisal on the chin and say, yep, okay, we completely cocked this one up, even though we spent millions on the whole branding process, then brilliantly, then brilliant. But I imagine there'll be other reviewers that probably think completely and utterly different to me. So there you go. That's the wonderful world of whiskey. And at the end of the day, the only people's opinion that really counts is you, the buyers. It's basically, and what you think, and do you want to buy it again? That's all it boils down to. You know, all the critics, the reviewers can say whatever they like, but you know, if you think that we're all talking out of our arse, then brilliant, and you'll go and buy it again, and White Mackay and the PR department will be really happy bunnies, shall we say. But until then, I've enjoyed this week's episode, so it has been fun. I do enjoy being slightly critical, shall we say, but again, I don't think I've been unduly, well, maybe I've been a bit harsh, I don't know. You decide. I'm sure you'll let me know in the comments. So anyway, until next week, good afternoon and good ramming.